Welcome in, friends. It's time again, the Cannabiz Conversations podcast, telling the stories of founders everywhere. And I love it because today is a special event because it's our first duo here of the season. And what's exciting about duos is that we get to hear different stories from different perspectives all around the same beautiful plant, which I know makes my day, as I'm sure it makes many of yours. Speaking of making my day, thank you so much to our team at Hephaestus, House of Automation, for all that you do for the show as a sponsor. And folks, if you're looking to produce 2,000 joints an hour and you'd like it to have the Dutch Crown finish with infused material, which it sounds like something hurts my hands even thinking about, you got to head over to Hephaestus-tech.com. That's Hephaestus, tech.com to find out more. They're the best. And once again, we really couldn't do it without them. All right. So today is fun. We have Jocelyn and Claudio, the co-founders of Budist. Jocelyn, how are you today?
I'm wonderful. Sean, I'm loving your energy. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a thing. I wake up this way, Jocelyn. I get out of bed this way. I don't use any caffeine. And frankly, I just smoked before I came out here. So the fact of the matter is I do that to sort of try to bring it down because I think it's almost too intense for my own self some days. So thank you. I appreciate it. Claudio, how are you, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, here's how it goes. For anyone who hasn't watched the show, because we tell the story of founders, it's important to first find out where they became, I would say, involved with this plant. Claudio, to my right on the screen as it sits today, hit me up with your thoughts, man. Where did it all begin for you in this beautiful plant?
Well, it began for me very early on. Like some folks, I got turned on to cannabis as an early teen, 13 years old. I had an older brother, a couple years older. So he was getting high at an early age. And as the younger brother, as it were, I got turned on to, the plant through his influence. I was kind of born and raised in Hollywood and in the Los Angeles area, where I think it's worth mentioning, like culturally, that was really like the epicenter. And I was a teenager of the 80s. And, for those familiar with that kind of time and place, it was the age of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I was really into heavy metal and fast living. And it wasn't just me. I wasn't kind of some like early bloomer, really like everybody that I kind of grew up with in the 80s. We were all just living fast. And so, started smoking at 13. By the time I was 14, I was already kind of as in the trade, as it were, and really got kind of active in the trade, 14, 15 years old, had some run-ins with the law around that time. And then, around 1985, it's funny because that's when, Reagan kind of was in office and Nancy Reagan kind of came out with her Just Say No to Drugs campaign. And so I was a part of all that. I went through kind of Scared Straight and all those programs. Yeah. And, fast forward to around 1987, I love the Grateful Dead references that you're displaying there. I got turned on to the Grateful Dead in 87, and that really changed my life. Prior to that, as I mentioned, I was kind of a Hessian heavy metaler, but I was Grateful Dead once. Yeah.
I was going to say, man, I want to pause you there for a second because you're already touching on a lot of stuff on the show. So we call it the 13 Club. So we've got quite a few guests that have been on the show, founders in the industry, part of the 13 Club. So that's always cool. I'm always jealous as a kid who grew up in the Midwest, hearing the stories of California people who grew up in this sort of, I don't want to say acceptable, but much more acceptable than it was for us, here. I grew up outside of Chicago, so it wasn't crazy foreign, but still not in the way that the Californians make it out to be. If I had $1 for every time someone made a Dare reference on this show, I wouldn't even have to do this show, I don't think. This show, I love it because what a disaster, right? Just from the onset. I tell people all the time, and I'm going to get a buddy of mine to make a shirt. Dare made me want to do drugs because when someone says to me, no, shouldn't be done, can't be done, won't be good for you, I think, now who is someone to say that about me, right? How is someone going to prejudge this for me? So yeah, man, I absolutely love the reference. So my biggest question, though, the biggest note I circled here was metal to dead. Tell me, how does one, because look, I did it because my brother raised me as a Metallica head, the Megadeths. My first show was Metallica, for Christ's sakes, after a Green Day concert. So yeah, no, my brother was the same reference point. But how did you make the switch?
Yeah, it's a funny question because for me, I hate to say this about myself, but it was almost like the poser extraordinaire. Like one day I'm marching down the high school halls wearing, all black, steel-toed boots, Satan. I love Slayer, Iron Maiden, and to this day I do as well. By the way, I love.
Sure, no, I didn't think you abandoned it. That's not what I'm talking about. I simply wonder where the stretch happened.
But I did, though. It was literally like one day I went to go see the Grateful Dead. My girlfriend's mom took me to go see a show. She was a Deadhead since the 60s. And I came home that day and it was literally like 24-hour transformation. I went from steel-toed boots and pentagrams to skirts and freaking Birkenstocks within a 24-hour window. And I remember going back to school the next day and people were like, wait a minute, is that you? Like, what happened? But that's how transformational the band is for people who wonder. Like, why are there all these Deadheads and why are they so fanatical? It truly was transformational for me. And I think a key part of that was, just bringing it back to the plant, is that it's just, cannabis was central to that culture, I think, as most people know. And it was just the lifestyle, the ethos, it was vegetarianism, it was cannabis, it was spirituality, and I think just something intrinsic in me wanted to live that lifestyle, and that lifestyle resonated with me. Whereas, as we know, with heavy metal, it was about, fast cars and narcotics and fast living, and it was, dark and it was gritty, and not that all that's not a good thing as well, but it's just, for me personally, my ethos was a little bit more aligned with the light and the magic and the plan than anything else. And so I glommed onto it instantly and proceeded to thereafter, see the Grateful Dead over, about a couple hundred, shows from 87 through like 92. I saw them all the way to 95, but around 92, I dropped out to go to college. So I started to slow down by that time.
Silly college gets in the way. I have to ask because we have Jocelyn here. Jocelyn, as this being a co-founder, is any of this news to you? Have you heard this all before?
Many of times. One of the really beautiful things that, because Claudio and I are both life partners and business partners in building Budist, and we share a lot of mutual loves and passions outside of just cannabis. Music is one of those biggest passions for me as well. I grew up in Orange County. I was born in December 1984. So for me, and music has been the biggest part of my life, like stemming back from my childhood. I grew up in a family of musicians. I've got a blended family where I grew up with 5 brothers. So a big, crazy household. But then growing up in the 90s, really, and especially being in Orange County, here comes Sublime, here comes No Doubt, here comes all these other bands that cannabis was really a core part of. Yeah. And so growing up specifically at that time for me, being born in Long Beach, which is so much like cannabis culture comes from Long Beach, from different music, whether Sublime or Snoop, the list goes on and on. But it was just really instrumental to my childhood. Cannabis has been a part of my childhood. I grew up around the plant. Like Claudio, I first tried, and I wasn't part of the 13 club. I'm part of the 15 club.
Yeah. All right. Part of the 15 club.
Growing up with 5 brothers. It was part of it,
Yeah, I was gonna say we probably shouldn't be celebrating any of these ages, right? But I at the end of the day, I realize that as a part of our culture, as a part of what we do here, as people who are connected to this planet in any sort of way, you have a story with it. It has impacted you. And see, again, growing up in Orange County, right? Now, I have to ask you, because I'm always intrigued by women getting involved. Because the culture of men and drugs it just seems more top of mind, right? But I always ask my wife, and I kind of know because, as Claudio referenced, getting into the business, I consider myself a legacy distributor from back in the day. And so that's how I met my wife, was through that and through other people. And so I kind of found out her story. But as a female, talk to me about like what it's like to have to, you're in Orange County, you're a female, young female. How do you get into the plant? What is that like to you? Is it introduced from other girlfriends? Is it a male influence? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was my brothers. You know, I grew up with 5 boys, and all of them consumed cannabis as well. And so I just vividly remember my first time consuming. It was at a party that we were having at my parents' house where they were out of town. And we're all sitting around the dining room table and just kind of puffing from an apple. And it just, you know, it didn't take with me at that time. It was just, I've always been a very free-spirited, very open-minded individual. And so, you know, trying things along the way, but it really wasn't until, you know, I moved up to San Francisco in my mid 20s that I really started seeking more just internal exploration. And it just took on a whole level of passion for me at that point. But in large part, you know, just getting into cannabis for me, it was a connection of just a familiarity, growing up around it. You know, it wasn't a stranger to my parents either. It was just something very normal kind of in my household growing up with. And it was never really looked upon as like a terrible thing, but also just like anything, my parents always instilled in us, do things consciously, be aware of the things that you're consuming, be free-spirited, go out and explore the world, but just do it in a way that's responsible. And, you know, those lessons have served me really well in my life.
That sounds very similar. Again, it sounds like the California way that my parents were saying to me, that they would give me autonomy until I deserved to have it taken away from me.
Yeah.
And basically was live and make those decisions, be responsible. No, you know, my dad used to always say, look, you can show up on a lot of things in the newspaper. The police blotter isn't one of them. You know, that isn't going to go well for any of us, me, you, or otherwise. And so it was top of mind, but in the same turn, I knew getting involved with this plant in the Midwest as a young kid was gonna, you know, offer those problems and opportunities to do that. Claudio, you mentioned run-ins with police during the origin story. Was it due to the plant, or was it due to just the other side of sort of, you know, you as an individual?
Oh, it was definitely due to the plant and more broadly just drug culture, you know, as teenagers. And as I mentioned, during that Reagan era with Just Say No and all those campaigns. I mean, it was very aggressive. I mean, I've been witness to many raids and had to deal with a lot of, you know, law enforcement from DEA all the way down to kind of local enforcement. You know, with me personally, you know, I'm Hispanic. I come from, you know, my family's from Chile. And so it's like I had kind of the duo there of being Hispanic and a hippie. And so, you know, for folks that have dealt with kind of a disproportionate kind of discrimination against from law enforcement against yourself, you know, I gave cops a lot of reason, you know, to want to pick a fight with me. And so I definitely had my run-in with the law, you know, several times when I was a teenager. And then on Grateful Dead tour, you know, the DEA was very active on Grateful Dead tour. And, you know, my group that I toured around with, you know, we ended up being part of, you know, a sting operation with organized crime, and it got really ugly. And so I hate to admit that I've seen some dark sides of it.
Wow, dude, that's wild. Again, this is why we tell these stories. You know, we get to hear them. I get to hear them all the time, and hearing from folks who have, you know, just this season alone, we've had folks talk to me about Angela Pye talking to me about getting pot in Hong Kong, and I'm thinking, how the did that happen? And she's basically like, look, don't ask, you know. We've got people talking about it from Israel. I mean, so growing up and listening to these stories and hearing, you know, these parts of the culture, and from your perspective, Claudio, it's interesting that you talk about that sort of, I don't mean like double whammy, right? That double opportunity for police to see the hippie plus the Hispanic, and it makes it more unfortunate for me to see sort of the ugly side of the policing culture when it comes to the plant. I mean, you know, I've always had a problem with it. I've always been in issue with it. I've never been in law enforcement's issue with it, like where I've been behind anyone on that as far as, you know, in trouble for it. But I have definitely fought for it front and center. And it's not an easy fight. And that's why Jocelyn, that's why I was so interested in your story of kind of building up the fight, because, you know, again, as a female and, you know, Southern California, this sort of vibe of like, we're talking about Claudio, not like a double whammy, but like a female who's into drugs seems like you would just get put into a really narrow box really quickly. Did you experience any of that growing up?
No, because I wasn't super open about it. And I think just kind of how I present, people wouldn't have really assumed that. I think for me, in large part, my interest in cannabis and the reason I started, one, initially trying it young, but two, more so getting into it when I was in college and then thereafter, it was really about self-exploration. I've been always someone who's very curious about myself, why I think the way that I do. And it just really has helped me like instrumentally in my life and getting to know who I am better and also just calming down my brain. I have a very overactive brain. The older I get, the more I wonder if I have ADHD. And I think that I probably do. And I think I've probably in large part been consuming to really just manage my brain and just create some calm. And so it's just, it's been something that I've just felt necessary to my spiritual well-being.
Yeah, I mean, look, I made the joke when we started, right? Like it's the same reason I've always used it was to find a way, because my parents were told I had ADHD, and at the time, I'm only a couple years older than you are, and so it's the same era. It's all the same thing. It's all the same parenting model, right? And so my parents were like, "Yeah, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. He doesn't need that." And they started to get to a point where they were like, "Does he?" And then I found the plant when I was like 14, and then all of a sudden they didn't know it, but my behavior changed, and they just assumed, they kind of wrote it off to puberty, and it all kind of worked out timing wise for me to be able to go, sweet, you guys are on the puberty train. I'm on this train. This is good. These are parallel tracks. You talked about your 20s moving to San Francisco and things sort of changing for you. In what way?
Well, okay. So I was born in Long Beach, spent the first 8 years of my life there. And then my family moved to Irvine, which, Irvine is one of the first master planned communities in the country. Everything runs on a grid. It's really structured. A lot of the houses look the same. It's all chain restaurants. So I just grew up in what felt rather sheltered for my childhood. But yet I'd always been this really free-spirited person who I've just had a strong curiosity in the world and all the things that I enjoy. And so, when I graduated college, it was 2007. The iPhone had come out that summer. And then fast forward a year later, I find myself working on the agency side, working with all these app developers as, apps are being born and our just whole world, really started to change in 2008, 2009, just with, the advent of mobile. So that brought me up to San Francisco when I was in my mid-20s. And for me personally, and where I was at that time, it was almost like I often describe it as going from black and white to color. My whole world just really opened up as I was in a place that was just filled with so much enthusiasm because, obviously just the whole tech scene in San Francisco really started to go through its own, the second kind of phase. And then here I was just meeting so many different kinds of people. It was so much more diversity than I had grown up around. My whole world opened up. And then further at that point, cannabis was there was this faction of people in tech that were really experimental. And at that time, then I started to use cannabis again, just to start to rediscover myself growing into an adult. And it just was a part of that connection for me and just kind of opening up my world to who I am and just the world around me. So it was just a really amazing period of my life that truly kind of shifted how I look at the world.
I love that. I love when the plant can make that because it's something that I've been struggling to sort of be able to vocalize in myself and what has happened to myself over the years and sort of that opening up. And I think it's the same way, Claudio, you talk about the transformational piece of the Grateful Dead and sort of those two pieces of the puzzle coming together and you being able to see more of the light than the dark. I assume your San Francisco moment was that dead, or was there another moment beyond that maybe kind of changed it for you where, and I love that. I mean, who doesn't love the idea of going from black and white to color, right? It's got some great Wizard of Oz imagery in my mind here. I love it. So Claudio, is that your black and white moment to color when it relates to the plant? Was that dead ascension?
Yeah, definitely. That was a part of it for sure. I mean, I felt that just, again, living in LA and being around the culture that is the music and kind of rock culture that I was born that I was born into, was very colorful, even when it wasn't Grateful Dead. But sure, with what the Grateful Dead did for me is then it got me out of Southern California. Like Jocelyn, I actually was born and raised in LA, but then my family did move to Orange County as well. And so I did start to get a little bit more of that homogenized kind of community in Orange. And then when I jumped on Grateful Dead tour, I was going across the country, seeing them in 30 states, nationwide. And now going and seeing all that diversity, going to New York for the first time, going to Philly, going to Boston, going to all the Midwest states, that definitely added a lot of texture and color to my perspective on life. And interestingly, one of the shows that's most memorable is I went and saw them at the Greek Theater in Berkeley in the late 80s. And I thought to myself as a teenager, like, I would love to live here one day and go to school here. And then fast forward a few years, I ended up getting into UC Berkeley for university. And so that was kind of a little bit of a short, like, full circle moment for me, where I was able to finally kind of be on that campus. And when I went to Berkeley, like Jocelyn, I felt like it was just a very different culture and community up here in the Bay Area. And that's where we live now, by the way. So I went to Berkeley in 1994. And I moved to Oakland just a few years later, and I'm still in the same residence that I moved to. That's where I'm at right now. So I've been here, since the 90s, posting up in Oakland. I've started kind of numerous cannabis companies here and kind of learned to cultivate here in the area. But around that time was really special because it wasn't just, just the whole hippie culture and everything that was going on. It was like the birth of Burning Man and that whole community. Rave culture was really popping. And most importantly for this conversation, it was the birth of, medical cannabis and the whole movement that got birthed here in San Francisco and in the Bay Area in the early stages of Prop 215. And I really at that time learned to cultivate. That's when indoor growing really took off. And I remember going to kind of the indoor garden centers here in Berkeley and learning to get all the tricks and techniques and the equipment and everything to kind of start to grow indoors. I did a lot of that. That's how I paid my way through school. So it was definitely another turning point or inflection point for me, and taught me a lot about this culture.
Yeah, I mean, look, early school manifestation right there. Wanting to go, liking the idea of UC Berkeley, then ended up there. I have a friend who him and his wife live there. They live in that area. She has a custard shop in downtown Berkeley that she runs, that she loves, and they're from the Midwest here, and they've been there forever. They love it out there. So, and again, I watched a lot of my friends go that way. I didn't make it that far. I got stuck in Colorado, and I never made it any further for me. And I ended up actually coming back to the Midwest. So quickly, while we wrap up the first half of the show, Claudio, for you, Grateful Dead show, you Alpine Valley?
I've been to Alpine Valley, yes.
Okay, it's like 30 minutes from my house.
Okay.
That's where I live in Wisconsin, in the middle of Prohibition, but we do have some cool music venues that we get to check out every
I've also seen a lot of fish there too. So I've been there a few times.
Yeah, I'm not a fish guy, but yes, my buddies all tell me those are as fun of shows as you will find. So that's great.
Yes.
Awesome. Jocelyn, I want to ask you on the way out. So you're using cannabis, as you say, for I don't want to say mind expansion, but better term. I'm sure there's one, but you're opening up your mind. When if anything, or do you make a jump when you start to have that be a mindset? Because this is a personal question, because I know I did. When you have that mindset, did you make the jump to trying other things outside of cannabis? And this is not a dare gateway question, for God's sakes. This is just simply an understanding of the mindset. Did that happen for you during this transition to San Francisco? Yes,
but what I paired it with was life and leaning into the things that I want to be doing. So for me, cannabis, I'm a daily flower consumer, and it's very much it's ritualistic for me, and it's often tied to certain activities. So when, in particular, when I started really diving deep into cannabis, it was in my transition of leaving a 10-year career in tech to join the cannabis industry in 2018. And I took 4 months off, which was the first time I'd really taken any time off. I was always a very young, ambitious person in my career. I've worked really, really hard throughout my entire professional career and just being. And I took this 4-month period off before coming into the cannabis industry. And because I knew I was going to be coming into the cannabis industry, I really started to take time to just really be much more thoughtful about my own consumption. And so what I paired cannabis with were things that I like to do, and then diving deep into that. So, I learned to play the guitar during this 4-month period that then became one of the most passionate, biggest parts of my life. I learned to play the guitar, the drums. I was in a weekly voice lesson during this 4-month period off. I was taking a 6-week pottery course. I was doing a 6-week course at San Francisco Cooking School. I was learning to sail a 28-foot keelboat on the San Francisco Bay. I was backpacking through Yosemite on my own. I just did all sorts of things to go find myself. And cannabis was really a part of all of those activities, especially music. It's just, for me, I am also I'm a very free-spirited person. I'm also a very pragmatic, rigid. I'm very thoughtful about the things I do. So that also can tend to lead to a lot of overthinking. And so for me, before playing any music, it's really just a ritualistic thing for me to light up a joint first and just to let myself relax, get into that, state of mind that's going to allow myself to be the freest possible version. So I'm not overthinking as I'm playing. Or with writing work, I love to write as well. So it's just any creative activity. I find it just entirely opens up my mind, which is where just the greatest art is produced,
It's so true. And music is just this constant vein that I hear from you, right? From the onset, from where it begins. And I think it's a great combination of the two. And I know it's what helped me really kind of become more of myself when, I all of a sudden kind of showed up to my senior year of high school, a hippie with long hair and, big, huge hemp dog collars and the whole 9 yards and dead shirts every day. And so it's something that I think helped me sort of feel accepted, I'm any kid, maybe I grew up with a little bit of trauma that I'm trying to find a way to not deal with. And this is the easiest way to sort of deal with that. But as I've gotten older, I've seen cannabis be able to be transformative when dealing with all of that shit. So, and I don't begrudge myself that approach in my, my late teens, early 20s versus my approach in my 40s. That wouldn't be fair to myself. So I think looking at it, from that perspective is really great. And for you to I make the joke that the last time I took 4 months off of cannabis was the 4 months before I found it. So the idea that you took 4 months off and were able to just sort of do this thing and be in a different place, I respect it. I really do. And it's something that I'm noticing, Claudio, this maybe sounds more like an old head thing to say, but I'm getting this newer age culture thing of taking THC breaks. And I'm like, I don't really get this. This seems, new age for me, but I've done it and I find myself not terribly hating it. Have you experienced this, Claudio, from your perspective as an old head?
For sure. I don't consume nearly as much as the community I hang out with these days. And for me, it's I have the opposite effect that Jocelyn does. For me, cannabis is not functional. For me, it's what I do at the end of my night. It's not social for me, nor is it functional. And I don't have as much of those experiences with the indicas or sativas and differences there. Just generally speaking, when I consume, I tend to be a little bit more introspective. It tends to relax me. It turns my mind off more than on. And so I tend to just consume, we're just, running Budist, which we're excited to talk to you about in the next episode. It's a 24/7 thing for us. We're working around the clock. And for me to be kind of performing at my best in that regard, I have to do that very clear-headed. And so cannabis, again, comes usually at the end of the night, oftentimes only on the weekends. And I do very moderate consumption.
I love that. I love to hear that because, again, in business relationships, my wife and I are pretty much daily consumers of flower, but our business partner is the nighttime guy. He is not functional. He will not have or do or be a part of. So he always kind of knows when we're vibing because we'll both call him on a speakerphone. He'll be like, guys, really? I'm like, yeah, dude, this is what I'm in a place to talk to you now. I'm usually super annoyed by you, right? So now I get to not be as much. No, I'm just kidding. He's also our editor, producer, so everything's fine. But yeah, no, it's one of those things that I look at. Look, you two have been wonderful in the first half here. We've already covered your origin stories. On the second half, though, I want to get into the origin story of the Budist because I think what you're doing takes tremendous guts. I think it takes planning, but I'm starting to sense where the history from this app comes from, and that this isn't some like, hey, we woke up one day and wanted to have an app. We really don't know what we're talking about. That isn't this. And I'm really excited to learn more about what it is. So we're going to talk about that on the second half. Folks, the second half will be here next Wednesday, so you don't have to wait long. It's going to be fine. Go back, watch this episode. If you've missed any of the previous episodes of the season, you should go watch those too, because again, our friends at Hephaestus, House of Automation, are this year's sponsors. If you don't know, you should know. The Aura X is their product. It delivers precision packed hand rolls, perfect each time, and up to 2,000 an hour. People can't do that work. Only machines can. So if you're looking for a pre-roll system that works for you, head over to HEFESTUS-tech.com to learn more. Thank you to them. Thank you, Jocelyn and Claudio, for part one. We appreciate you and your origin stories, and we look forward to hearing all about the Budist on the next one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
All right. Great job. Thank you. So everything looks the exact same what we just did. Same intro, same on-screen, same sponsor riffs. At the end of this episode, however, we'll get into what I call the hot hits. And those hot hits are just quick word associations. But for you guys, I'm going to do it a little different. I want to understand what's happening on the app right now. So I'm going to ask you questions about the vertical, about what's the most of this or what's the least of that or whatever, so that it give you a chance even more to kind of close the show with more of what I know I look at when I look to the app and what I talk about when I talk to people about it, because I've been doing my research since this was recommended to me. So I'm feeling pretty good about that part of it, and really want to continue to dig in and learn as much from you two as possible. Okay?
Cool.
All right, very good. Then we will get started here, part two. Welcome back, friends. Cannabis Conversation podcast brought to you by Hephaestus, the House of Automation. If you don't know them, you should. They're one of the best in the business. Their Aura X is top rated, out here delivering 2,000 joints an hour. I've been saying it all season because, again, just think about what it takes you to roll one joint or two joints or three joints. And then imagine 2,000 of those in an hour. It's incredible. Head over to HEFESTUS-tech.com to learn more. All right. So if you missed the first half, pause, go back. This is not going to make any sense. Literally, I'm serious. Go back, watch their first half, learn all about their origin stories and how we got here. Because today on this episode, we're going to be talking about the co-founders of the app Budist and how they got here and what the app is all about. So we started with Claudio on the origin story. We're going to kick it to Jocelyn on the Budist origin story. Jocelyn, where does the journey of this app begin for you?
I know. There's quite a big story here. So let me share from my perspective, because Claudio and I each come in from a little bit of a different perspective here. But for me, really, the origin of Budist coming together, I mean, it's truly through recognizing multiple different pain points in the industry over my last 8 years in the industry. One of those major pain points is just, we've got this really exciting marketplace of all of these different brands and products that are being created over this last 8 years in the licensed market, I should say, in the recreational market. And you've got these incredible craft producers. You've got these incredible products that are really changing people's lives. But at this point in our industry, there's just so little information about what your experience could be like with these individual products. I mean, obviously, there's sites like Leafly and Weed Maps, but it's really just scratching the surface. It's either focused on what the strain is or, you know, where you can find these products. Our industry has really been lacking a dedicated resource that's all about products and what your experience could be like with these products.
Yes. Education. Jocelyn, that's what I like about what you're all up to here, because I do not make my bones in cannabis. I've been in the background of cannabis. My wife and I were medical growers in Colorado in the mid 2000s. I've been making my bones my whole life in automotive. It's where I run my organization today. It's everything that I do. I've done funding for cannabis, I've done this other stuff in the background, consulting, but I don't live there. So what I am in cannabis, though, is I'm a consumer. I live in a prohibition state, so everywhere I go, where ain't that? I go and get everything I possibly can to experience these things from different perspectives. And every single time I go into a different dispensary, I think the same thing. there's no education. And I know what I'm looking for, and I know what I like, right? But there's no brand education. You must trust what's in the dispensary. You must trust the word of a bud tender. And look, I was just in Illinois, okay? I hate it there because it's all iPads. It's just all iPads. And if you don't know, then you don't know. And so, Jocelyn, this pain point of education, you saw this from both consumerism as well as brand. Is that where it resonated for you, or was one side heavier?
Yeah, well, for my first 5 years in the cannabis industry, I helped build a company called Headset, the data and analytics company, one of the leading data and analytics companies for our industry. And it was a very unique experience for me because, here I was just at the birth of the recreational market here in California. And I was studying all the consumer trends as they were developing in real time. I was watching brands be born. I was seeing the price points that they have. I was seeing kind of where they sit on the retail shelf, and then watching every other licensed or legal market come online. And then I was in the market, traveling around the country, meeting with producers, meeting with retailers, meeting with policymakers and regulators. So I had a really interesting view of the market, what products were selling in the market, and what consumer trends look like. And as we see today, most consumers are purchasing on price point and THC level. Well, why is that? Because they don't yet have a great understanding of what their experience may be like with these products, the quality of products. And by understanding that, that's what really helps, evolve the retail shelf, where you find products at all different price points. You really understand the different use cases of these products. And if you look at other industries, prior to being in the cannabis industry, spending 10 years in the birth of the mobile app space, I watched apps like Yelp and TripAdvisor and Vivino and Untapped. I watched and worked with many of those apps as they came out. So I saw the impact of how, product information, consumer education really helped develop a whole market. And often, we use this good analogy. Well, taking a step back, for people who aren't familiar, the simple way to describe Budist is we're kind of like the wine spectator of cannabis. We've got our rating and review app. We do competitions where we use our methodology, the 100-point system, our team of Budists, and we use that to assess product categories for various competitions. And then we do, reports, we do expert content, and then tasting events. But the thing is that if you look at using, the restaurant industry, for example, and being here in the Bay Area, I remember when Yelp came out, for example. And if you think about Yelp, launching in, I think, 2004 when they launched, prior to Yelp, your average consumer didn't really have a great understanding of really restaurants at the time outside of the individual voice of the critic that was then sharing in Zagat or Michelin, or, your reporters that were, writing for the LA Times and your restaurant reviewers. But what Yelp did is Yelp really democratized the process where everyone had a voice in reviewing restaurants, providing their opinion. And what happened from that is it really developed an entire culture of connoisseurship and appreciation for food, where now you see this whole world of foodies out there, whether they're becoming their own food critics. It's just developed this really rich world. And for the restaurant space to develop in that way, things like Yelp were really instrumental in that process because it just developed a channel, a platform for people to share their own voice, their own opinions. And then it developed this whole culture of appreciation. So for me, and from my perspective, kind of understanding that, watching, these other apps evolve in that way and the cultures that were created through that process, it really solved a lot of the problems that we are now seeing in the cannabis industry. Again, where producers and these incredible products they're creating don't really have that awareness or that understanding from the consumer standpoint. And we don't yet have this universal kind of culture that's been created in cannabis. It's very siloed and segmented. And what we're hoping to do through Budist and really through, product reviews, education around producers, getting into conversations around regions and terroir and what makes it so unique, but really just having this dedicated home where people can go and learn and share and be a part of a community. That's what we're trying to build for cannabis, which we think is really instrumental in creating a true kind of culture of product appreciation.
Well, I'm telling you, I cannot agree with you more. It's something that is so lacking. And again, I think people need to once in a while pinch themselves about how fast this whole thing has moved, as far as legalization. I know it doesn't feel that way for the folks who live the rigor every day. I completely understand that. But Claudio, if I was to ask a, 15-year-old version of you, if you saw that this version of you was going to have this many states of legalization, I think even growing up in LA, you may still think I was crazy at this point in our lives.
100%. Yeah. We always did, even in kind of the late 80s, early 90s, I was involved in legalization kind of advocacy and was, very much a proponent of that. But as much as we desired it and wished for it, it just seemed to be that the institutional bias and just the government control over controlled substances was too great for us to kind of overcome it in the way that we progressively have. And so the short answer is no, I wouldn't have expected that the industry would have evolved. And we still have a long way to go, by the way, but just the degree to which we've evolved has been spectacular. And for someone who's been watching that for 30, 40 years, it truly is remarkable. And and then just super excited to see kind of where it's at, and especially being actively involved in it as well, not just as kind of on the sidelines.
Yeah, you're as much as you are the spectator, right? You are not. You are living it every day. You are seeing it, and that's the kind of perspective that I hope folks get from this. And I hope that it's clipped and put all over social. The idea is that we've come a long way, and I know it doesn't feel fast enough or whatever for everyone, and I get it. But with context comes, great realization as far as I'm concerned. And so that's the context of it. Jocelyn, I want to go back to a part you talked about Yelp, right? And then Yelp came out and they created this culture of review and the kind of inner workings. And then Google gets involved because they're Google and they're like, okay, we can do reviews too. And we can go through all these iterations. But Yelp was the starter, right? So they're the ones that opened up the niche of the review business. For you to mention that as far as what you were around, how cool to be able to see that from an inside sort of San Francisco life. It's a very unique perspective that I think really helps me greater understand why you feel it not only necessary and needed, but possible to do what you're doing with the Budist. It's got to get you excited every day. You probably think and make those parallels, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And Yelp's just one example. Again, you look at every vertical. If you look at film, right, you've got Rotten Tomatoes, having that dual score rating system where you got the critic's opinion, you've got your everyday moviegoer's opinion. I don't know about you, but I don't watch a movie these days without first seeing on Rotten Tomatoes what the scores are.
Yeah. It's funny. We also do that with the Google guide where it's like it shows you what movies they want you to watch. So we're always like, well, what does Rotten Tomatoes think? And it's like, ooh, no, we're not gonna. Sorry, Google, it's not for us. But yeah, you're totally right. That's a great analogy with that. So as you guys get going, and I'm gonna start with Jocelyn on this, and I'll plug it up to Claudio after. When you guys how does it come together? The two of you, like the idea of the Budist. What is that birth point look like that day? How does it happen?
Well, I'll start with just kind of a fun aside. Claudio and I are both life partners and business partners in building Budist. And we actually met at a headset data night that I was helping co-host in San Francisco 7 years ago, right before the pandemic. And both of us, one of the common kind of connections outside of cannabis and music that we both love is the love and appreciation for wine. And being here in the Bay Area, being so close to just one of the greatest wine regions in the world, and also having, travel's been another major love of mine. I've traveled to 42 states, 35 countries. I've been to many different wine regions, Claudio as well. And so just understanding history and seeing how wine appreciation developed over this last 40 years. And this really amazing, fun community that exists in the wine industry. That was another part of our kind of origin story, and kind of part of the inspiration is just understanding how much community and how much education has really developed out the wine industry, and what a fun world it is to be a part of. And so, and Claudio, I'll let you kind of chime in here and speak for yourself, because wine is really such a big passion for him as well, that is just a strong through line and connector to kind of what we're doing overall at Budist and our origin story.
Yeah. And again, I think it's commendable because I do it every single day and have for the last 13 years. I work side by side with my wife. She's my CFO. She's my sounding board. She's someone who I rely on for, we always say she doesn't have kids. And I'm like, you got 2 kids, you got me, and you got this company. Like, sorry, you're not sorry, but like, it's one of those things that the support, when it happens that way, when you have common interests, people always look at us like we're crazy. But to us, it doesn't seem at all weird or even unnatural to go about our lives. I joke, we share like 90% of the same oxygen, and it's just the way it goes. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Claudio, what is your aha moment when it comes to the Budist, man? Where did it go? You know what? Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Well, there's a couple pillars. One Joss just touched upon with the wine industry. As she mentioned, I've been a wine lover, connoisseur for the better part of my adult years. I've traveled the world of wine and became like a collector and got really into it. And one thing that I learned in that process is, for those who have delved into the universe of wine, it's incredibly rich and diverse. There's just dozens of regions worldwide. Within a given region, there's dozens, if not hundreds, of great varietals. Within those varietals, there's hundreds of producers. Within those producers, there's dozens of different production methods. And it's just all these splinters and nuances of complexity. And what we found in the wine industry, and this is also true of like coffee or chocolate or cheese and other connoisseur products, but with wine, it's most pronounced, where you have this massive information gap that sits between the producer and the consumer. And what you have there is that, you got all these producers, all these regions and everything I just finished saying. And on the other end of that spectrum, you got the consumer that starts to learn and appreciate wine. Maybe they go to their first wine tasting in Napa Valley, or they go to a family event where they have an aha moment with a bottle, right? And at that point, they jump into the rabbit hole, right? But the thing is, how do they navigate that rich universe of just all those options and complexity? And that is the role of that in the wine industry, you have competitions, critics, journalists, the various things that fill that gap, sommeliers, and that's effectively what we're building with Budist. So one aha moment for both of us was seeing how the wine industry matured into what it is today, with premiumization and all the kind of diversity that you see on the wine shelf, and it's going from supermarket shelves to specialty wine stores. We saw that it will hold true for cannabis, and that there's a critical role in the maturation process toward that outcome, and that is the role of the critic, of the competition, of the wine educator and sommelier. So that's one key component that was the aha moment for us. Let's bring this reality to cannabis. The second for me personally was, I've been an operator in the cannabis industry for over 12 years. I mentioned in the prior episode that I was in the trade for about 10 years as a young adult. But then I took about 15 years off, and I got back into cannabis around 2013, 14, and I became an owner operator. I owned 3 dispensaries. I got into extraction and large scale cultivation. I've basically, in the California market, I've owned every license type with the exception of testing lab. And through that process, and one of the main things that, I consider myself a brand marketer amongst kind of, the different kind of professions. And one thing that I really kind of focused on was developing premium brands in the market. One of the brands that, your listeners might be most familiar with is Guild Extracts. I co-founded that brand, and it at the time was the premium concentrate brand. We really, when a lot of concentrates were a little bit more kind of niche or part of the kind of underground market, we designed and built that brand to be more premium. And we were looking again at analogous kind of adjacent markets like wine, like premium retail. And anyway, so, I built a family of brands, and the whole idea was can we create connoisseur grade cannabis products? How can we really be intentional in our execution, from the actual product itself to the packaging and the marketing around it? And one thing I found right out of the gate was just all the challenges that we know all the cannabis brands have in today's market is how do you connect with consumers? How do you educate them? How do you communicate quality? How do you communicate provenance and production practices and all the things that all these great producers stand for? And we found a real need in the market. And so a lot of this is the proverbial entrepreneur scratching his or her own itch of how do we solve this problem in the market for other brands that are trying to navigate the same challenges that I navigated firsthand in building and scaling cannabis brands in the California market.
Yeah, because I think people forget how it's an uphill battle, for you guys can't just, I'm in car business, right? I can wake up any platform I want. As long as I got the dough, I can play on it. It does not make a difference, right? Our average client spends $30,000 a month on digital advertising. Just let that soak in, right? Granted, the price points are different. That's like boring to some of my clients. Like, and again, these are guys in competitive markets, LA, Chicago, New York. So, but the point is that they don't have to think about it. They just give the money, we hit the platform, we do it. Y'all can't do that. Y'all can't just wake up and as a dispensary go, hey, yeah, let's tell people what the special today is on IG and, get out a Facebook message. It doesn't work like that. So was that part of it for you, Jocelyn, where you were like, look, I'm not going to be hijacked by social media and algorithms telling me how and where I can operate. I shall create my own.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's to your point, it's incredibly challenging when you're a cannabis business and you can't use the traditional channels that any other company would use. Instagram, like our Budist account has been shut down half a dozen times. My personal Instagram account just this summer, I had it banned for over a month. Were just my personal account. So absolutely, that stunts us as an industry. It stunts us as a community in not being able to share about the uniqueness of products, just about this space that we're building. So absolutely, like that was part of it. Let's build a platform to which we can then celebrate these producers, we can celebrate these products. And most importantly, this is about helping consumers navigate the retail shelf. And it's also about creating a community of people, whether you are a medicinal or recreational consumer. A lot of what we're talking about is it might be a little bit more geared toward the connoisseur side and the recreational side. But what we're trying to do at Budist is really be a platform for any use case and any reason that you need a cannabis product. You should have a place that you can go and understand that product, be able to learn from other people, just like any other industry has. And this is really, our attempt at doing that and just to help normalize cannabis.
Well, look, what I love about it is that typically, I said I'm in a prohibition state, but I don't shy away from who I am or what I do. So wherever I go, people know pretty much what I'm into. And I have a bowling league of friends I've been bowling with forever. And so I always get from anyone in the bowling, I don't even have to know them. They'll walk up to me and they'll ask me weed related questions. And now I get to say, you know what? Here, just head over to this website, BUDI. Yep, there you go. Head over there because this is where you can go learn, you can go see, you can go have products be something that isn't, it's the word of the customer. And to me, growing up in the car business, I built an entire business model on referral. The immediacy, the first time I got referred a deal, I just talked about this on my automotive podcast. The first time someone came in and said, so-and-so referred me, the light bulb went off and went, dude, I don't have to sit here and wait for business to come to me. Every time I sell a car, it could be worth selling 5 more in the future. Let's work this. Let's be in this for the long haul. And it furthered I started when I was 19 and I'm 45 now. So it's definitely worked for me, but it's great to see the way you guys are talking about it. The wine thing I love too, because I'm not a wine guy. I'm not a coffee guy. Like we're in Costa Rica and they were laughing at us every single morning. They couldn't help it. They were so cute about it. They're like, coffee. We're like, no. They're just like, what do you mean? It's Costa Rica. You have to drink coffee. I'm like, no, I'm good. Can you find me a joint? Never mind. I'm fine. I brought my own. So, right. So you're here living this life. So for you guys on the side of Budist, what does it take to get started? Give me the 2 cents from each of you. Jocelyn, we'll start with you. What did it take to get started? Are you quitting your career? What's the origin story of just jumping off the bridge and launching the brand?
Yeah, well, we initially launched the brand. We did what you have to do as a startup, right? You raise a little bit of money, you get together your kind of co-founding team, And we already had the thesis idea. An incredible amount of research went into this. Both Claudio and I are big history buffs. We love to learn. And so we had a really well thought through plan in developing this out. And, we launched the app in December of 2024, officially is when it went live in the marketplace. Funny enough, Apple and Google actually pushed it live on my birthday. So I happen to share the same birthday as Budist, which I just take as a sign from the universe that we are on the right track.
Absolutely.
But then we officially publicly debuted the company here in California in March of 2024. And, that was also with our announcement that we were going to be partnering with the California State Fair, and that our team of critics were going to be serving as the judges. And we were going to use our Budist methodology to review each category to really create a level of standardization and professionalism that we wanted to bring to competitions. And so it moved really quick for us. We had assembled this team, our group of 30 critics, over a 6-month period as we were developing out the app. We put together an editorial guideline where we got everybody on the same page as to how we're going to review each product category, how we're going to do it in an unbiased manner. So it's based on the brand's intended use case, meaning if they're creating a sleep edible, well, does that product actually work for sleep?
Did I go to sleep? Is it working? In this way? That is so crucial to hear. The State Fair piece, real quick. I don't want to lose it. You're still involved, right, with the State Fair?
Yes.
Yeah. So the stuff I see, Lauren Carpenter, you guys are all sort of in this huge, beautiful circle of just cannabis wonderfulness at your State Fair. And again, super jealous because here in Wisconsin, we were one of the #1 hemp export states in the world, not only this country, but the world. And we have great history with it. We have wonderful soil, and our State Fair sucks. I know everyone loves it. I know everyone goes every year, blah, blah, blah. It sucks in comparison to what I see in California. So I got to get out there. What a special moment though for you and what you're doing that quickly, that level of, justification, if you will, that we are on the right track. Very cool to get.
Yes. Well, and if I might add, just the whole experience building Budist, we often say it's for the community, by the community. And it really truly is. As we were even developing out the idea, we went around to 100+ different brands and we said, hey, look, this is what we're going to build. We're going to build our first dedicated rating and review platform for our industry. We're going to get together a group of critics that are some of the most trusted people in the space. And together we are going to really help drive a culture, more product appreciation, help drive awareness to quality products. So we got buy-in a year before we even had a product in the market. And so it really was instrumental, I think, when people see all the activity and all the support that we have from many different segments of the industry, that didn't happen overnight. It happened because we let people into this from the onset when this was an idea, and we have really grown together. And so it's really remarkable to see where Budist is at now. And it is because of the community, truly.
That's awesome. And I think it is common where people see what you've done and how quickly it's happened. They think, boy, they did that fast. That's not the case. This has been a work in progress. I say it to people all the time. We've been in business 13 years. The last 2 years of our business have been the best we've ever had. And it's not by accident. It's kind of part of the plan. I'm in it for the longest of long games. And anything that I approach. Claudio, for you, man, what's the start like this for you? Jocelyn tells me about how the community is there. You've done the work. Now, I don't want to put people in boxes, but I'm going to say Jocelyn seems more like me, kind of the idea that the builder outside. Where do you, not that you're not, all right, but where do you fit into this whole thing as far as in launching this, in making this debut a thing?
Yeah. Jocelyn and I like to say that she's kind of more the external facing kind of person and I'm more internal. So she is a core part of the vision and really community builder.
I mean, look, she said she wouldn't do the show without you, man. All right. She made it very clear to me that this show would not happen without you being here. So, I mean, she's not trying to just be the face. She's trying to, she's trying to bring you in, man. She's like, you're like her Bobby Weir right now. You know what I'm saying? You can appreciate that right now, right? She's like, come here, have a few tracks. I want you to be here. No, I love it, man. I love it. So where do you think you fit? If she's internal, if she's external, you're internal. What does that mean to the company the way it sits right now?
Yep. Yeah. So for me, that means I'm everything kind of internal, operational. I just do a lot of the strategizing and the actual operational execution. We do, everything we've talked about, a lot of it's about the app and the platform, but that's also just as much in real life events. We do a lot of events. Our competitions have a big event component. A lot of our tasting events that we do, very event focused. So for us, this is equal part digital as it is in real life. And a lot of those events that we do, so running a competition, another competition that we recently did is the MJ Bowl, which was the first bi-coastal where we did California and New York, not against each other, but celebrating the best of both those states. And we brought them together at MJ BizCon. It was in partnership with them. We're on that stage in December. We celebrated the best of each state. But my point there is that, developing a team, here in California, we got 30 plus critics/judges. We had to build a team of 15 out in New York. There's just a lot of operational execution there in managing teams of critics and judges. With the state fair, we're talking, we had over 600 entries into that competition. That throughput of all those entries, getting it out to all of our judges, collating all those scores, reporting that back, working with our partners, just that component alone, is a lot of work. So and not that Jocelyn isn't doing a lot of that work, she is as well. We like, for simplicity's sake, outward and inward. In reality, we're both doing a little bit of each, but definitely I'm the guy heads down with other members of our team that are executing on these things.
Dude, I mean, just to hear you guys talk about the volume at which goes into these things. And I think the shows are awesome. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, Jocelyn, but pardon me, when I heard about the New York, LA thing, I was hoping for a little Long Beach, a little competition, a little East-West deal. I really was kind of gearing myself up for such a thing, but I do like that it ended up being something more about the people and the individualism of it, because as a kid who grew up in competition, I just said this the other day to someone, that being competitive got me to where I am in my 40s. It's not how I'm going to live till I'm 60. I'm going to have to scale that son of a bitch back a little bit and bring it down and make it more about community and people. So I want to get to this part really fast, and then we'll get into our final segment of hot hits. But with what you're doing, and you have the events, and you're doing events mainly in Cali, or are we is it starting to already expand beyond Cali? Hit me there first.
Primarily in California, but we're also going to be doing some events in New York this year that we're really excited about.
Okay. And this is what excites me, is that's 2 of what? 20, right? States of opportunity, of availability for what you're all doing and how you're doing it. Granted, scale probably becomes a little difficult because it's a lot of man hours, women hours involved in all this work, right? So it's not a lot. There's a little bit of sheer automation, but a majority of this stuff, when 600 things come in that have to be sent out to 15 people, that's people work, right? So you guys have done it, but what's the hope for future state expansion? Jocelyn, tell me your thoughts, and we'll ask Claudio his.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, we hope that Budist will certainly in the next several years, 5 years, be a national platform where we're able to have a team in every core cannabis market, that we're, reviewing products in every market, doing competitions in every market. With the MJ Bowl this year, we're going to plan to expand that out from just the 2 states to adding in a couple more states. So stay tuned for that. We'll be announcing that in the next couple months.
Nice.
But it's really about, just continuing to go market to market, because of the fragmentation of cannabis and how it's regulated. We have to be very strategic and just launch state by state. And that's fortunately something I know well, just from my time at Headset. I launched 11 markets over a 3-year period. And from the outside world, that might seem like, oh, how are you not able to just launch everywhere all at once? But it just doesn't work like that. So it's a very strategic way that we're rolling out. We're very thoughtful about, just everything strategy-wise at this company. And so, so more states this year for sure for the MJ Bowl. Hopefully in the next 5, you'll see Budist in a significant amount of regulated states.
Long game, Jocelyn, long game. Claudio, your thoughts on what is to come for the folks at Budist?
Yeah, well, another kind of dimension of that, we've, as Jocelyn has mentioned, it's been very product focused in brands. But, and looking back to wine as an example, as you kind of started to widen that aperture, behind every product, there's a producer. Behind every producer, there's a practice and a methodology, a production method. Behind every production method, there's a region, right? Within regions, there's appellations and terroir. And so now wine has matured where you can go to every major wine region and see topographical maps. You can see appellations and AVAs, viticulture areas, and really getting into the terroir and the origin stories of these different producers. And what that does is that it starts to really more clearly delineate different regional characteristics, right? Now, whether that's a climatological characteristic or a soil composition characteristic, but also a cultural characteristic. We've known in cannabis for a long time that there is the kind of the LA cannabis scene, and then there's the New York cannabis scene, and there's different preferences in terms of what people largely produce and distribute, as well as what consumers like within those different markets. And so it's starting to really delineate all that. And what that does is that it helps kind of blow open a lot of the diversity. And we know that cannabis, just with its hundreds of compounds and dozens of different form factors and use cases, offers so much diversity to the world and to consumers. And we've seen that, but what we're also seeing is a lot of homogenization. As you get more MSOs, as you get more kind of capital and corporatism within the industry, things start to look the same. You tend to see a shelf that is predominated by a bunch of distillate carts in different packaging, right? So it's like, how can we try to kind of go back and really go back to origins and regions and heritage? And within every market, there is a story like that. So for us, it's really about blowing that open and celebrating that. And one just last quick thing I want to say there is, we're not the only ones that's doing that. We stand on the shoulders of a lot of predecessors, whether it's the Emerald Cup, they for so long, and hopefully they'll continue in whatever ways they can to continue doing this type of work of celebrating craftsmanship, celebrating our cultural heritage here in California in that example, in our example, but really starting to do that in all these different markets, because we're seeing other countries, other regions that have their story to tell. So that's a key part of what we do at Budist, is we are storytellers. We're trying to fill that gap, as I mentioned earlier, and really kind of tease out all these nuances that the plan has to offer, because truly we're just getting started. The average consumer has no idea this world exists in the plenitude that it does exist. So that's our job, is to expose that and to help educate and bring that in digestible formats.
What a job it is, and what a job you are both doing. I thank you for it. As I said, a consumer first. I think it's amazing. And I think that it's something that I know I recommend to other people to check out and to learn and to be understood as far as what's available to understand your education and how you can make sure that the product you think you're getting is doing what it is that you think it's going to do. And it's so crucial to know, and I don't know how much it happens because I don't see much of it, but like the bad actor stuff too, right? The products that don't have favorable reviews. This isn't about going after someone. This is about a consumer's experience. It's about someone's VOC, right? And so if that's what they have, that's what they have. So you two are really doing a wonderful job. We'll wrap up the show with our hot hit segment. The hot hits today is going to be all about the Budist brand. And yeah, you guessed it. Hot hits brought to you by Hephaestus House of Automation. Thank you guys so much for your sponsorship this year and your trust. It means a ton to me and the team. We really appreciate it. If you're looking to get your automation game to the next level, head over to hephaestus-tech.com. All right, hot hits. Here we go. We're going to go ladies first throughout this here. So Jocelyn, in your opinion, what's the top vertical reviewed right now on Budist?
Oh, flower for sure.
Flower for sure. Claudio, that's a yes as well. You're in agreement with that?
Flower and concentrates. Definitely. They're always neck and neck. That's the connoisseur products.
All right. See the concentrate guy, Jocelyn. He can't help himself, right? He has to bring it in. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Because I have a YouTube channel, both here and in automotive, sometimes people like to leave me really, really, really lengthy reviews about my shows. but it only happens around specific topics. Does that happen to you? Is there a vertical that people will write a freaking book about?
Our events. Absolutely. We just finished our Fleur Nouveau event this last Thursday at the Woods in West Hollywood. And the number of responses that we've received from consumers, the brands that were participating, our partners in this, it is so heartwarming. We circulate them to our team. It just brings tears to my eyes. It is really wonderful to see how much people appreciate just the level of thought that we're doing and just appreciating that this is for the consumer. This is for the community.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Claudio, same opinion there? Same thing?
Yeah, well, definitely we'll bring it back to the products and the brands. I think that's one of the beautiful things about the platform is that as you go in and explore the different categories and products, you see long form reviews. One would think, as we finished saying a minute ago, with like flower concentrates, where people really geek out on aroma and flavor and texture and effect. But then you swing the pendulum over to the medicinal use cases, and you find that person that discovered, cannabis, whether it's a tincture, a topical, a gummy, to solve a medical use case. Then you see them go on about how it saved their life, or they saved their child's life, or their grandmother's life. And then you get this heartfelt testimonial about the life-changing aspects of it. And that's a whole another long form review that you can just just sit back and enjoy.
That's the best part of it. When my wife and I were medical growers, it was our favorite part, was donating, 75% of what came off those plants to the people's permits that we held. They didn't have the resources. They didn't have the time. They didn't have the understanding. We're fortunate to have all of it under one roof. And we did that, and we gave that back. And it was to 15-year-olds with cancer, 70-year-olds just trying to go to sleep. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. If someone wanted their plants grown and they had a permit, we'd do it for them. And it was amazing. It was some of the best parts. It's what I miss most about living in a prohibition state, is that I can't do the one thing that I should have the God-given right to do no matter what, which is grow my own plants. But that's for another day. Let's ask the last two. All right, this is the fun word association. Jocelyn, I say reschedule. You say what?
Now.
Okay. Claudio, reschedule.
Deschedule.
Okay, all right. See, let's do it now and let's do it right. Okay, I like that. And finally, Jocelyn, tell us right. I think I already know the answer. I think you already gave it away. But favorite way to consume as it sits right now today?
Oh, a joint, flower.
The music and the guitar imagery really burned in the brain. I figured that'd be the answer. And Claudio, for our nighttime consumption, what are we choosing?
I'm definitely flower as well. I hate to say, a good old outdoor, organic, sun-grown flower.
There we go.
There we go. Favorite.
My friends at Humboldt Family Farms, I'm trying to get Dee on the show here to come on and do a show here this year. So hopefully it'll be the episode after you guys if I can get him secured. But you mentioned the Woods. Is that the Woody Harrelson place in West Hollywood? Yes. It looks so beautiful. It looks just so like where I want to go hang out and consume and be somewhere in West Hollywood. Like that looks like the spot. So
it really is. Yeah.
I'm super jealous of where I see you guys hang out and do your stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, if people follow along on our Budist Instagram account, you can get some fun kind of behind the scenes and get a sense of the Woods environment and just other tasting events that we host.
That is awesome. That is awesome. You two, thank you so much. You have been absolutely wonderful. I'm sorry we went a little over our normal scheduled time, but it's hard to stop telling this wonderful story. So I'm so glad you both shared it with me today.
Oh, thank you, Sean.
We
appreciate you so much.
Awesome. Folks, if you missed the first half of this, go back, watch it before you check this one out. We thank you so much for joining us, and with thanking on the mind, thank you, Hephaestus, House of Automation, cannabis operators looking for consistency and up to 2,000 joints an hour with only one operator. Look no farther, Hephaestus-tech.com. Thank you to them, and thank you to Jocelyn and Claudio for your time. And if you haven't done it yet, head over and check out the Budist when you get a chance, because I'll tell you what, if you're looking for education, look nowhere else than there. Thank you guys so much. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.